Hi, I'm Jenna, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about the cognitive perspective of psychology. Cognitive psych. Cognitive psychology emerged as a major part of the field in the 70s and 80s. One of the major topics of it was how people represent experiences mentally and how they make decisions. It basically relies on two assumptions. First is that it's critical to understand how people deal with information that surrounds them. And also that the flow of life consists of an elaborate web of decisions. Schemas. Schemas are mental organizations of information. Schemas are basically categories. Sometimes the sense of a category is explicit, but sometimes only implicit. These can include elements like perceptual images, abstract knowledge, emotional qualities, and information about time sequence. Exemplar basically means examples. Schemas include information about specific cases and also about more general sense of what the category is. An idealized best member of the category is often called the prototype. It is the best actual member you've experienced so far, and it's considered the idealized member. The term fuzzy set has been used to convey the sense that schema is defined in a vague way by a set of criteria that are relevant but not necessary. Some effects of schemas include, well, first of all, they make it easy to put new information into memory. The schema tells where in the ongoing experience to look for information. Specifically, you look for information related to the schema. Changing schemas changes what you look for, and as a result, you notice different things. Default is using a memory that you've had before, or assuming something is true unless told otherwise. And a second effect of schemas, then, is to bring default information from memory to fill gaps. And we're going to talk a little bit about types of memory. Semantic memory is organized by meaning. It's categories of objects and concepts. Episodic memory is memory for events or episodes. It is experiences of space and time. In episodic memory, elements of an event are strung together as they happened. If you experience enough episodes of a given type, a schema for that class of episodes starts to form. That kind of schema is a script. A script is a prototype of an event or category, and it is used partly to perceive and interpret a common event. A script provides a perception with a sense of duration and a sense of flow and change throughout the event. Procedural knowledge, that's going to be your knowledge about what you're doing. Doing sometimes means engaging in specific overt behaviors, but it sometimes means engaging in mental manipulations. And then we're going to talk a little bit about self-schemas. A self-schema is the one you form about yourself. Most of us spend a lot of time thinking about ourselves and what we're doing and how we're doing it and the goals we set. It has a lot to do with our self-schema, just like our self-concept. The self-schema, like any schema, makes it easier to remember things that fit in. It provides you with a lot of default information, and it tells you where to look for new information. Some people keep different aspects distinct from each other. You've probably spent more time noticing things about yourself more than anyone else, like I've said before. Each of these people have different goals, and each activity they do has its own place in their self-image. People high in this are high in self-complexity. People low in this are low in self-complexity. And that all has to do with our possible selves, which is what we strive to be and what we strive not to be. And we use our possible selves as a motivator because it gives us goals to approach and goals to avoid. Oh, and then a little bit about depressive self-schemas quickly. Inaccurate schemas are used quickly and spontaneous, producing a stream of automatic thoughts. These automatic thoughts influence feelings and behaviors. The pattern has a run-on quality because the negative feelings lead to more use of negative schemas, which in turn leads to more negative effects, and so on. So automatic thoughts can be very important and very powerful. People who are prone to depression or anxiety seem to over-rely on information and memory and under-rely on the reality of a situation, which I thought is really interesting. And that's a direct quote from the book. It's a really interesting theory on depression, that people that are depressed are more likely to use their memory of things that went bad or good rather than in the moment, and they're living more in the past than in the present. A cognitive triad is negative thinking about the self, the world, and the future. Depressed people also use other distortions. They overgeneralize in a negative way and form a single bad outcome to their overall sense of self-worth. All right. Attribution. An important aspect of experiencing events is judging their causes, and inferring a cause tells you whether the event was intentional or accidental. It also tells you something about how likely the event is to occur again. Inferring the cause of an event is an attribution. A lot of times, the process of making attribution relies partly on schemas we've already developed and social situations that we are in at the moment. Activating memories. A big part of activating memories are our nodes, or areas of storage, and they are linked if they have a logical connection. Some connections are semantic, linking attributes that contribute to a category. Others are episodic, linking attributes to form an event. Like the map on the screen you see, you think about an orange. Oftentimes you'll think about some of the other things branching out. Orange is a fruit. An orange is colored orange. It is edible. Contains vitamin C. It's round-shaped. These are just examples of how nodes can be activated, because when you think of one thing, you're often likely to think of another because your pathways will light up in that area. Priming. Priming is activating a node by a task that precedes the task of interest. This technique was first used to study two questions. One is whether the same information is more accessible later on. That is, it takes a while for activation to fade. This partial activation would leave the node more accessible than before until the activation is gone. A subliminal prime is primes that are outside of their awareness. Subliminal primes often have the same effect as overt primes. For example, people who have the goal of forming an impression pay attention to different things than people who have the goal of memorizing. Now we're going to talk a little bit about connectionism, which is a big part of cognitive psych. So what is it? Connectionism. The connectionist view uses neural processes as a metaphor for cognitive processes. Because the nervous system processes information simultaneously along many pathways, parallel processing is one of its key features. This view also holds that representations aren't centralized in specific nodes. Rather, a representation exists in a pattern of activation of an entire network of neurons. Connectionists describe cognition in terms of networks of simple neuron-like units in which processing means passing activations from one unit to another. And the picture on the right is just an ambiguous figure. And you can see two possibilities in the figure if you look closely. From far away, I think most people see, or at least I see, a young lady looking towards her back, and she's wearing a tight necklace and a feather boa, and she has a feather in her hair, and she's wearing a scarf on her head. But if you look really closely and you zoom in, you can change that to a different view, and you can see an old woman looking down. And what used to be the girl's young face is now the actual lady's nose. It's a large nose and a large chin, and she's looking down. The perception of this object is a big part of how you make ambiguous figures to make sense. Dual process models, conscious versus intuitive. Smolensky argued that a conscious processor is used for effortful reasoning and following of programs of instructions, and that an intuitive processor manages intuitive problem solving, heuristic strategies, and skilled or automatic activities using connectionist processes. So both of those are looked at as a dual process model, just in different ways. Later on in the book, they talk about Epstein's theory, and he argued about cognitive experimental self-theory, and it assumes that we experience reality through two systems. The rational system, which operates mostly consciously, uses logical rules, and is fairly slow. This is a symbolic processor that we think of as our rational mind. The experimental system is intuitive. It's a quick and dirty way of assessing and responding to reality. It relies on shortcuts and readily available information. It functions automatically and largely outside consciousness. And then just to close up, I'm going to just finish talking about knowledge. Implicit and explicit knowledge are two main categories in this section. Explicit knowledge, which is accessible on demand, and implicit knowledge, which isn't. Implicit knowledge is the existence of automatic mental associations we aren't really aware of. The discovery of implicit attitude has led to a much larger exploration of implicit knowledge of various kinds, including implicit theories of the self. Implicit self-esteem has been found to relate to negative feeling states in day-to-day life, independent of any role of explicit self-esteem. So these two pieces of knowledge have a great understanding in the process of cognitive psychology. And I hope you learned a little bit more today about knowledge and memory and the difference between the two, and how we process events and objects and all our senses in real life. Thank you.